Each apostle carried the flame of Pentecost in a different direction, scattering like seeds across the known world. Beyond the Bible traditions and ancient texts, trace the apostles' footsteps, further than the West ever knew. In Ethiopia, a church claims to guard one of the Ark's lost relics. In Kerala, Indian Christians celebrate Saint Thomas not as a myth, but as their founder. James, son of Zebedee, was executed by Herod, becoming the first martyr apostle. It is said that the man who betrayed him converted and was executed alongside him. Peter preached in Jerusalem, Joppa, and eventually Rome, where he was crucified upside down, saying he was not worthy to die like his Lord. Thomas stating no more. Indian Christians trace their faith to his witness. He was speared to death while praying. James, the brother of Jesus, led the church in Jerusalem and was thrown from the Temple Mount for refusing to deny Christ. Andrew took the gospel to what is now Ukraine and Russia. He was crucified on an X-shaped cross, preaching to the end. John, the beloved disciple, became the last living apostle. Tradition says he survived being boiled in oil and later received the revelation of Jesus Christ while exiled on the island of Patmos. And then there was Paul, the former persecutor turned apostle. He was there when the first martyr fell, standing in approval as Stephen was stoned. A young man named Saul held the coats of the killers, unaware that his own life was about to be completely undone by the very Christ he opposed. He was once the church's greatest threat. A Pharisee named Saul, fierce in his mission to crush this new movement of Christ followers. But on the road to Damascus, everything changed. A blinding light, a voice from heaven. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? That voice was Jesus. From that moment on, the persecutor became a preacher. Paul, as he would come to be known, would not only join the apostles, he would outpace them all, traveling over 10,000 miles by land and sea. Paul carried the gospel across Asia Minor, through Greece, and into the heart of the Roman Empire. His letters would become the backbone of Christian theology. His life, a testimony of radical transformation. He debated philosophers in Athens, was stoned in Lystra, shipwrecked on Malta, and imprisoned in Rome. When Paul appealed to Caesar, tradition holds that he stood before Nero himself. The gospel, once whispered in house churches, was now declared in Caesar's courts. Within years, Nero would turn on Christians, believing them for the fires of Rome. The gospel had entered the heart of empire and would never move. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. 2 Timothy 4:7. These men didn't build cathedrals or institutions. They made disciples. They preached in streets, synagogues, and homes. And their blood became the seat of the church. The apostles are gone. The eyewitnesses to Jesus have vanished from the streets. But the fire they lit only spread. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries, plagues swept through the Roman Empire. Pagans fled the cities, leaving their sick behind. But Christians stayed. They nursed the dying, buried the dead, and risked their own lives for strangers. Their love stunned the empire. Even pagan historians wrote of it. Look how they love each other. Some scholars believe these acts of mercy doubled or tripled the number of believers within decades. Polycarp, an old bishop from Smyrna, stood before the Roman governor. They begged him to deny Christ. But he said, 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? He was burned alive. In North Africa, a noble woman named Perpetua and her friend Felicity, a pregnant slave, were sentenced to death for their faith. In her journal, one of the oldest known from a Christian woman, Perpetua wrote of her dreams, her courage, and her peace. Stand fast in the faith and love one another. They died in the arena, but their story lived on. In a world that silenced women, the early church listened. They didn't just make room, they relied on them. Priscilla helped teach the great preacher Apollos. Phoebe carried Paul's letter to the Romans and likely read it aloud, explaining it to the first hearers. Junia was named among the apostles. Their names weren't in stained glass, but they were written in eternity. Women hosted the house churches. They discipled, served, gave, and stood unshaken when persecution came. Many paid the same price as the men. And some were the last to leave the course, and the first to see the empty tomb. In the Roman world, they had little power, but in the church, they had purpose. There was Thecla, a noble woman who left behind wealth and marriage to follow Paul. When the empire tried to burn her alive, the flames died out. When beasts were unleashed in the arena, they lay at her feet. She preached Christ in cities that had never heard his name, and the legend of Thecla spread like fire. In Rome, Marcella, a wealthy widow, turned her home into a school of scripture. She mastered Hebrew and Greek, debated with theologians, and gave her fortune to the poor. When invaders ransacked the city, they demanded treasure. She told them, I have already given it to Christ. And in Cappadocia, there was Macrina, sister to Basil the Great and Gregory of Nyssa. But before they were saints, she was their teacher. She led her family in a life of simplicity, prayer, and worship, the seeds of Christian monasticism. When her brothers wrote their great theological works, they credited her wisdom behind the words. In recent years, archaeology has uncovered a remarkable glimpse into the role of women in early Christianity. The mosaic floor of an ancient church at Megiddo the earliest known church building, bears an inscription asking the community to remember Pramila and Syriac and Dorothea, and lastly, Cresta. This is unusual. Rather than God alone remembering them, the community is called to do so. Though we know little about these women, the inscription highlights their significance. Their memory, preserved in stone, reveals how women played vital roles in the early church, often unsung but deeply respected.